We're in Psalm 8. We left off Friday, just a few verses into this psalm, and I love this psalm. This psalm it's a psalm of contrast. It is, one commentary says, it is the psalm, he titled it, "The God of the Insignificant." David is considering the vast difference between God's majesty and the microscopic seeming insignificance of mankind, and how that God is the God of an insignificant man. What is man that thou art mindful of him? So let's look at verse 1. Let's read the whole psalm to get a context. We'll probably finish this psalm this week, maybe in the next few days. Our Lord, O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth, who hast set thy glory above the heavens. Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings hast thou ordained strength because of thine enemies, that thou mightest still the enemy and the avenger. When I consider thy heavens, the works of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hast crowned him with glory and honor. Thou madest him to have dominion over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, yea, the beasts of the field, the fowl of the air, the fish of the sea, and whatsoever passeth through the paths of the seas. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. As I read this, I imagine, and this is purely conjecture, it's my imagination, I imagine David maybe dealing with his enemies as a younger man. Maybe he's just killed that lion or bear. Maybe he's already been anointed king, but is still subservient as a young man, waiting for God to fulfill that. Maybe he's been driven out by Saul. Maybe he's keeping his sheep and he's laying out on a hillside one night, and I picture him reclined back, laying in the grass, looking up in open sky. And I imagine the stars of that vast expanse, maybe the hills of Bethlehem, maybe the spring of En-Gedi. I mean, I don't know where he is when he writes this. Maybe he is surrounded by literal enemies. Maybe he's just contemplating past deliverances. But he's looking at the vast expanse of the universe, the stars and the moon, and it's very present to him, and he's considering that God did that. And he's imagining, why would the God who can do that care about me? And that's where we left off on Friday. What is man that thou art mindful, thoughtful, considerate of him? And the Son of Man that thou visitest him. We'll come back to that phrase, Son of Man, but we talked about on Friday that God cares for us. That's what the term visitest means. It means that loving, tender, affectionate care that God expresses to you and to me. The one who spread the stars across the universe leans in close to you and cares. He cares about your summer. He cares about your vacation. He cares about your church. He cares about your family and your marriage and your job. He cares about the stress you're carrying. He cares about the bills you need to pay. He cares about the needs that you need met in your life. He cares about the test you've got to pass or the certification you've got to go through. He cares about the purchase you're making or the contract you're signing. He cares about the steps you're taking. He cares about the details of your life. So many times, so many stories that come to my mind where I was tempted not to pray about something because I'm thinking, God's busy with bigger stuff. Like, does he really care about me finding that lost thing? Or, my mind is going blank probably because there are so many options. But, there are times in my life where I almost didn't pray about something because I thought that's so trivial. That's such a minutia in my life. Why would God ever care to give attention to that? But yes, friend, he's the God of the minutia. He's the God of the frail and the weak and the insignificant, the seemingly insignificant. It's not insignificant to him. I think that's what David is contemplating here, is whether literal or figurative. We already talked about the fulfillment of verse 2 in Jesus in the temple, but David in this moment is probably contemplating his own weakness, his own fragility, that he's a babe in scope, in scope to the magnitude and the power and the majesty of God. and he's thinking, you can do anything. If you could do that, you could bring deliverance from the cooing of a baby. You could use a small child to bring about incredible victory. And so many parallels to New Testament, to gospel theology, because Jesus became a baby. He did become an infant, and God did actually conquer the greatest of all enemies through the smallest of things, the baby Jesus. Well, look at verse 4 again. What is man that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man that thou visitest him? One thing about this psalm is it's quoted often or multiple times in the New Testament. We already saw in Matthew where it's quoted, but Hebrews 2 is another location where this is quoted. And we see kind of a near and a far fulfillment, or a near understanding and like a local understanding, and then a bigger, broader, big picture understanding of it. The near understanding is mindful of him, Son of Man. You care for him, that's us. And he's made us a little lower, that's us. He's made us a little lower than the angels. We don't have the place or the abilities or we have a faith relationship with God like that's different than the angels. We are lower than the angels in our created state, but we are crowned. Has crowned him with glory and honor. God made us lower than the angels, but crowned us with an eternal, infinite, higher value, willing to give his own life, the life of his Son, for us, and willing then to share with us the inheritance of Christ and the dominion of Christ. We will rule and reign with him. That's what verse 6 says. Thou hast made him to have dominion over the works of thy hands, and thou hast put all things under his feet. So again, the near view is God created mankind lower than the angels, that's you and me, crowned us with glory and honor, value. He cherishes, he treasures us, he cares about us. And he's given us dominion over this planet and over the works that he created and over the creation that he made. He gave us ruling, dominance, dominion over it, and put all of it under our feet. We are the highest of God's created order. But what's the bigger, what's the more comprehensive view? And that is that this is ultimately fulfilled in Jesus, the perfect man. Jesus, who loved to refer to himself as the Son of Man. Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels, as Hebrews describes him, but he has been lifted up, Ephesians 1, high above all principalities and powers, and he is the head over all things, and he will, Colossians, over all things have preeminence. And Hebrews teaches that he was made a little lower than the angels, but he was the one that was ultimately crowned with glory and honor, and everything is in subjection under him, and we will share in that dominion, that ruling and reigning with him. So again, the near view and the big view, Jesus is the highest, greatest fulfillment of this picture. Look at verse 6. Thou hast made him to have dominion over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things under his feet. And I think we'll end here today. Dominion. God has given you dominion. Now, you don't have the dominion of Jesus, okay? And there's nothing to compare between the dominion that he's given you and me and the dominion he's given Christ. But think about this. You are created by God, placed in time and space in this moment of creation to exercise dominion over the privileges, responsibilities, opportunities, relationships, stewardships. I say this carefully because dominion, we got to be careful with that word. Stewardship of God's delegated to you a realm of responsibility. That's a good sense of what dominion is, okay? It's not autonomy. We are subject to him. It's not unilateral authority. His authority is delegated to us. It's not authoritarianism. That's not the point. It's not a kind of lordship, lording over. That's not the point. No, it is a submissive, subjected acceptance of stewardship and responsibility, sacred assignments that God has given us dominion over. He calls us to share in the authority that he has over all of creation. and he says, here's your responsibility. Sorry about that. Here's your talents is the parable that Jesus talked about. Here's your stewardship that I call you to exercise leadership and influence and stewardship over, and use it responsibly. Multiply it for kingdom purposes. You have a small dominion of kingdom responsibility under Jesus' greater, grander dominion. And that dominion is a work of God's hand. So for instance, as a parent, as my children were growing up, you could say I had a responsibility. I had some small dominion over them to exercise the authority of Jesus in their life, the love of Jesus, the care of Jesus, the grace of Jesus. It was my responsibility to flow that to them. What an amazing opportunity. So my friend, take the responsibility that God's given you and steward it as a sacred responsibility given to you by the Creator, the one who has dominion over everything. This week, as you begin your week, choose to be a faithful steward of the responsibilities and opportunities that God's given you. Have a great Monday. We'll see you tomorrow.